All right, chapter 4. Then I looked again at all the acts of oppression that were being committed under the sun. And behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and that they had no one to comfort them. And on the side of their oppressors was great power, but they had no one to comfort them. So I congratulated the dead who are already dead, more than those who are living and are still living. Better off than both of them is the one that has never even existed, has never seen the evil activity, all that is done under the sun. And I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is a result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. For this too is vanity, as if striving after the wind. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. One hand full of rest is better than 2 fists full of labor and striving after the wind. Then I looked again at vanity under the sun, and there was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother, yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with mere riches, and he never asked, "For whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure?" For this too is vanity and a grievous task. For 2 are better than 1, because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them fails or falls, the one will lift up his companion, but woe to the one who falls when there is no other to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm, but how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him, who is alone? 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. A poor yet wise lad is better than an old and foolish king who knows no longer how to receive instruction. For he has come out of prison to be a king, even though he was born poor in his own kingdom. For I have seen all the living under the sun, the throng to the side of the second lad who replaces him. And there is no end to all the people, and to all who were before them, and even the ones who will come later. They will not be happy with him. For this too is vanity, as if striving after the wind. Oh, there they are up there. What do you think? Pretty sad commentary, eh?
Yep.
Oh, he's late. What do you think about this chapter? No opinions at all, folks? Nothing? You got nothing? My boy Luke come at me yesterday with a whole lot of nothing. That's what you doing? You coming to me today with a whole lot of nothing.
Well, some of the statements that he makes there are very, in terms of human nature, I think.
Okay, you're in the ballpark. Let's get you up at bat here.
Yeah.
Expand upon that concept.
Well, he's talking about what people tend to do, the tendencies of people, and I don't know if he includes himself in there, but he's talking in generalities, like the fools, everybody wants to succeed, but their motivation is because they see the one next to him or the neighbors, and which is the worst motivation of them all, and so they are not going to succeed because of it, because the motivation is wrong.
There's a blessing and a bane here. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you what it is. And you're not far off, Racha. Mm-hmm. You're not far off. Now, as you can see by my incredibly well-detailed drawings, this is our boy over here. He just hates everything. And he looked at things, material things, and said and came to the conclusion that this is all worthless. I mean, you can own all the money in the world and still be miserable. You can own all the riches in the world, all the power in the world, all the possessions. He went through them all, remember? Went through the wine, women, song, the whole 9 yards. And he came out still longing and wanting. Remember, this is the guy with this huge emptiness inside of him. Huge emptiness that he can't fill. And he tried to fill it with all the things of the world, and it just, nothing really worked out for him. Chapter 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 3, he basically writes his dirge for all of these things when he says, nothing is worth it. Nothing will solve his inner turmoil. Nothing of this world will ever solve my inner turmoil. Regardless of how rich I get, how many girls I get, how many houses I own. He tried them all, got them all. He's a great king, great power, great possession, and he's still miserable. So now what's he doing? Well, he does have a little foresight left in that he's no longer focusing on the material things, but he's beginning to look at other people, right? Other people, companionship, relationship. Ooh, wow. Hey, wait a minute. Relationship. But as he begins to analyze, if you will, or inspect the value of a relationship, what does he do? Well, he tries to characterize it or defend it or define it, if you will, in terms of what?
What does the other guy want?
Worldly stuff.
Yeah.
And what they will go through to get it.
Right.
And he even goes so far as to say, if they do get it, they will not only find that it is vain, as he found, but that they can't keep it. Can't keep it. It too will fail them, and it too will end up in somebody else's hands. You work your whole life, and then you drop dead. Who gets all your stuff?
The next guy.
The guy who didn't work a lick for it, right? Kind of like, sounds like our government, right? So, two hands that are idle, this is the modern generation's theology. Two hands that are idle doing nothing is better than two hands working furiously to try and gain stuff who won't be able to keep it in the long run. Because they'll die, and the guy that did nothing and never had any intention of doing anything will get it all. Just for being there. And he's questioning both the validity and the value of relationships in general. So he's already written off all the materialistic things of the world. Now he's looking at maybe one possibility, and that is
Shirley.
the people, person, the people. Who?
Shirley.
So he's writing off the one thing, and he even says, there may be merit here, but again, he begins to identify it or to define it in terms of material possessions. Did you guys ever see the movie? Tom Hanks did it. It's called Castaway. Mm-hmm. And he's lost on an island. He's a UPS guy, and the UPS plane crashes in the ocean. And he makes it, he survives to an island, and he gets on the island, he's all by himself, right? And he goes through all the hardships of being on the island by yourself. No water, no food, no material things, no shelter. And eventually, he makes a fire and he says, "Oh, I am God, I made fire." And anyway, what does he value most on that island?
A softball.
A volleyball. A volleyball happened to be a Wilson volleyball. And he puts hair on it and that stuff, remember? And he puts a face on it from his handprint. And he begins to see that volleyball as a prized and cherished, not just possession, but what? An entity with which he can relate. In fact, at the end of the movie, before he gets rescued, he loses his volleyball, and it almost drives him insane. He's at a loss because suddenly this is no more. Think about it. How many pieces of literature have been written over history? How many pieces of fine literature where there's always the one guy in turmoil? We know that. He's in turmoil, firstly, with all the world things, but then secondly, he longs for a companion. Robinson Crusoe had his boy Friday, right? Mm-hmm. They all had a guy. Batman had Robin. Everybody had a sidekick, and as long as they had a sidekick, they had an identity beyond themselves. And as long as they had an identity beyond themselves, well, that for a time was somewhat of a palliative treatment. At least I don't have to go through this alone. It would be much more miserable if I were by myself. But since there's two of us and we're both suffering and dying, then it's great.
Two are better than one.
Well, that's the going cliche. And he says that. Well, no, he does say that. He goes, okay, if you have one guy and he lays down by himself, how's he going to stay warm? Yeah. But if you got two people, a husband and wife, and they're laying down together in an igloo or something, they're going to be a little warmer than the one guy, right? Mm-hmm. So there is inherent value in having another relationship. But the problem here is that he's identifying the relationship or the worth of this relationship in terms of what? Worldly stuff, which is in essence a very selfish perspective. I like Tim because Tim makes millions of dollars, so I'm going to be buddies with Tim. Why? Has Tim got any inherent value for my longing or what's killing me? Remember, this is his emptiness, his longing. Well, not necessarily, but at least he's worthy of my time and interest, because then if Tim dies, maybe I can get his stuff. How many kids have said to their grandparents, "Grandma, remember me in your will"? I know a story about this. It's a true story. Kentucky man, billionaire, had lots of money. And he had the one worthless nephew named, I can't remember his name. It was something weird, like Boxer or something. Who names their kids that? Well, you go to Kentucky, that makes a lot of sense. So anyway, Boxer was one of these nephew kids that never worked a day in his life, didn't intend on working a day in his life, knew grandpa or uncle, whatever, was a zillionaire. And he just kept, every day, letter on the phone, in person, remember me in your will, remember me in your will, remember me in your will. Because he was an old man, very old man, zillions of dollars, and who's he going to leave it to? He doesn't have any family, he doesn't have any kids, but he's got a nephew, a worthless nephew, someone who's never, he wouldn't get out of bed if he didn't have to go to the bathroom. If he could find somebody to feed him, he would, so he wouldn't have to raise his own arm and eat something. So when it was all said and done, and I know this because it was in the newspaper in Kentucky, when the guy finally died, of course the first question on everybody's mind,
Who's going to get it?
Who's going to get his money? Because that's who we are. We look at people in terms of not the inherent value of a second being that we have the potential of building a relationship with. We look at people in terms of, well, what do they got? What do they accomplish? What did they achieve? How can I have a part of this? Because it always gets back to the what's in it for me question, right? So anyway, he gave his billions to this charity and that charity and heart research and cancer research and, all the different researches and stuff. And at the very end of the will, as they printed on the paper, it said, "Oh yeah, and Boxer, I know every day of your life you reminded me to remember you in your will. Okay, this is you. Hi, Boxer. I'm your uncle. I'm dead. You get nothing. But I did remember you." And they printed that in the Kentucky paper. I don't know whatever happened to that kid, but he didn't get a lick, nothing. But see, that kid acts just like we do. We pick our friends by virtue of whether or not they deserve me. You're pretty lucky, Barb, because you get to hang with me. Yeah, right. But we do that, don't we?
No.
We pick our friends. The only thing we say, the old cliche, well, can't pick your family. Thank God for that. A lot of us wouldn't have families. But we do that. We evaluate everybody in terms of worldly stuff. Now, is the Lord presenting this in a favorable light? No, none whatsoever. None. He looked at the worldly things, says, I got to quell this longing. I looked at every possible way to do it. Nothing. Nothing did it. So now he's looking beyond the worldly things, which is kind of a noble step. But then as he takes one step forward, he's taken two steps back in that he's governing that individual by virtue of what? Of worldly things. Is Benny just only worth something because she's earned it or worked on it and achieved it or whatever? Or is Benny just inherently worth it because she's here? Like I said, Tom Hanks established not just a relationship, but quite an intimate relationship with a volleyball. As funny as we saw that in the movie, it bespeaks a very real truth. Now, he took it a little too far. But the fact of the matter is, if we could do to one another as Tom Hanks portrayed to the volleyball, I wonder how much stronger our relationships would be with each other. Now, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here. If we could do to God what we could do with each other, how much better would our relationship with God be? And the day we take God's eyes upon ourselves, all this other stuff will start to fall into place. When Jesus spoke to his people, a lot of what he said they couldn't understand. It was as if he was turning their world upside down. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God. Well, let me retranslate that for you to a bit. That's the old Puritan ethic. Seek first a relationship with God. Not because of all the stuff he's got, but because you want the relationship. This should never even enter the equation. That's the power of that verse. Seek first the kingdom of God. All this stuff will take care of itself. Jesus even says, God knows you need to eat something. He made you an organic, somewhat linear individual. And either you eat, you got three things you must do. You've got to eat, take in nourishment. You've got to breathe, take in oxygen. And you've got to expel the waste. Everything else in your life is an option. Those three things you must do if you're to maintain this physical existence. You stop eating, what happens? You die. You stop breathing, what happens? You die. You stop going to the little boy's room, what happens? You explode. Then you die. Either way, none of them end well. You have to do three things God makes you do, whether you like it or not, to maintain this existence. Other than that, everything else is an option. What you eat, he doesn't care. What you wear, he doesn't care. How many times you breathe a second, he doesn't care. You see what I'm saying? Oh, that's an option. Because you are more than what you eat, what you drink, what you wear. I like the little thing Jesus threw in there. I think Jesus got an incredible sense of humor, even better than mine. And when we get to heaven, all those professors that yelled at me for having a sense of humor, they're in for a rude awakening. Jesus said, even Solomon in all of his glory. Remember Solomon? Mm-hmm. Funny he should mention Solomon. Mm-hmm. Greatest of the kings. Richest of the kings. Maybe this is Solomon, Ecclesiastes. Nothing in the world could please him. But he had everything in the world. That's easy for somebody that's got everything in the world to say, well, I'm not happy about anything. If you haven't eaten in 3 days, you're going, I would love just a crust of bread. Because right after the Solomon story, Jesus told Lazarus and the rich guy story. Remember that story? The rich guy had everything, didn't care about anybody. Lazarus just sat at his gate every day begging a crust of bread, covered in sores. And the guy never gave him a morsel, nothing. And what happened to Lazarus? Well, he didn't do one of those 3 things. He didn't eat. So what happened to Lazarus? Well, he died. And he went into the arms of the Lord. And so eventually the rich guy died. Remember this story at all? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the rich guy didn't go into the arms of Christ. He went down to the lake of fire. Mm-hmm. And he calls out and says, Lord, let Abraham stick his finger in some water and drop one drop down. Mm-hmm. And the Lord answers, I can't do that. Abraham's not allowed to do that, and he can't do it anyway because between you and I, there's a great chasm fixed. You ever ask yourself what that great chasm is? We tend to think of it as some kind of space, right? What about some kind of being where God is saying, Abraham is not another one of your manipulative, worldly things that you can play with as you see fit and as you need. I know you need a drop of water on your tongue, but you had that chance. You didn't. Lazarus stood in great need of one of the 3 basic things you gotta have. And you didn't lift a finger to give him anything because why? Well, you valued him as not worthy of a relationship. And that's because he had nothing. Except a bunch of sores, a body that was infected, a body that was disgusting. Probably didn't smell too good either. Solomon in all his glory, said the Lord, this is God speaking, Jesus, did not array himself as beautifully as one of these simple little field lilies, one of the little flowers in the grass. Do you ever look at those little tiny flowers in the grass?
Yes.
They're pretty intricate.
Yeah.
Pretty fantastic. My mother used to grow these things that looked like it was weird. It was like a thing. And it had all these different parts that kept coming out of it. And it was every different color in the world. And I look at those things. I used to call them eat me flowers because it looked like something that would eat you if you weren't careful. Oh, no! I didn't know what they were. I still don't know what they are. But they were fascinating. No little child could look in that and say, wow, that just happened. Intelligent design behind that sucker. I know I couldn't build one like that. Jesus ended his Sermon on the Mount, greatest sermon ever preached, by saying, seek first the kingdom of God, the relationship with the Lord. And all this other stuff, don't sweat it. God knows you need food. He knows you need air. He kind of made you that way. He knows you need clothes. It gets cold. It gets hot. But I tell you, Solomon, the greatest of your kings, the richest of your kings, the most biggest of the biggest, the most of the most, is not as dressed as beautifully as one of these simple little flowers. Do you ever notice how many times God, or Jesus, the person of God, refers to nature and their whimsical lack of care of their own existence. Look at the birds of the air. They neither plow nor sow nor reap, do they? And what happens? God feeds them. God feeds them. How many birds in the air, Barbara?
Well, in my yard, there's probably about 25.
All right, times that by 7.6 billion homes and yards, and tell me how many birds are in the air. You know, I have a hard time making dinner for one wife every night. I had to feed that many every night. Wow. I got a better.
Rabbits in there too.
Well, I was just about to say that. You know, the bird thing is nice, cute little illustration. But if Jesus were alive today and lived in Florida, he'd say, how many squirrels? Look at the squirrels in your yard.
Yeah.
How many of them reap and sow and plant and harvest? None of them, but God feeds them all, right?
But they plant acorns.
They do.
Yeah.
But they've taken the easy way too. They're the boxers, because my squirrels don't plant nothing. They just wait for the birds to get off the feeder and they climb up and eat that. So the birds of the air, you know, putting in a complaint to God, saying, will you get these rodents out of here?
I like going out and feeding the birds.
This is what happens when you get old and crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty soon she'll be out there in her nightgown doing one of these numbers.
That has been done too.
I rest my case. Yeah, better luck with a volleyball than the crazy neighbor next door. Trust me, I've got one across the street. Oh, wait, she's married to Lee. I remember just shortly after I moved into that house.
You kept telling me I was crazy, so we're too crazy.
Just shortly after I moved into that house, and this is a true story. I don't know if Mark remembers it or not. But Carol and I, we hadn't even got our stuff in the house yet. We just moved in. And Mark had moved in like a week before, 2 weeks before. But here's this guy with just short shorts on. No shirt, no nothing, no shoes. On a girl's little pink bike with an umbrella in his hand because it was a windy day. And he goes, look, I don't have to pedal. And he goes right past him. Look, I don't have to pedal. And he went back.
Crazy.
Carol and I were just standing there going, great, welcome to the neighborhood. That was my first impression of Mark. Henceforth, the name Crazy Man. Chief Nutso out there. Jesus said, Solomon in all his glory was not as valuable as this little flower. I like Scrooge. You ever watch Scrooge? I want to talk about Scrooge in the sermon today. Carol and I do this every once in a while. I don't know why. It's just we do. Do you know how many, versions or movies of Scrooge there are? There's like 20 of them. I mean, from everybody. You got guys you don't know. The old British guy, I like him the best. Humbug, good afternoon. Be gone with you. To Patrick Stewart. I mean, he's the captain of the Enterprise. He's also Scrooge. And he does a very semi-pseudo-American English interpretation of it. And then George C. Scott. Come on, he's Patton, for crying out loud. I saw him blow up half the Nazi army. And now he's Scrooge and he's fighting and wrestling with a couple of ghosts.
You got the Muppets?
The Muppets. I saw one, this was the most ridiculous one, but it was a musical Scrooge. You ever see Scrooge dancing around?
No.
Yeah, you don't want to. But so every year, Carol and I will sit on the couch and we will have Scrooge Fest. And we will turn on the TV smart app thing and we will go to, I think it's Prime, whatever, that carries all the Scrooges. And we'll just go Scrooge after Scrooge after Scrooge for like 3 nights in a row until you're just, God, one more time, Tiny Tim, say it. Pow. But it's amazing Why do we like that story? Charles Dickens wrote it. It's a gold mine. Why do we like that story? I'll tell you why. Because God answered his prayer.
And Scrooge kept his promise, and he kept Christmas every day in his heart all year long. He became a better man than even he could ever become. He became a father to Tiny Tim and one of the greatest guys in the whole of the community. Right?
What saved a Scrooge? A relationship with something bigger than himself. Maybe it was the fear of death. Maybe it was the reality that maybe he isn't this. All the stuff he had, but brought no peace to him. And maybe he got a shot at this with the prompting of a few, rambunctious ghosts. But finally he made a decision. It's almost when Jesus looked at Judas and said, what you decide, what you choose quickly. I mean, the die is really set and cast. And Scrooge went for this. Now, I'm not trying to liken Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol unto the Word of God. But where did Dickens get it from? Do you know what Ecclesiastes is, people? Any idea? It's the story of Scrooge. It's a Christmas Carol. Right now, this guy, chapter 4, is saying, humbug! Come on, uncle, come have dinner with us. Humbug! I'll keep Christmas in our own way. But you don't keep it. I don't care. Humbug, get out. Throws Fred out the door for the 15th time. Just once I'd like to say, Fred, don't go in there. But every time he does. Good afternoon, uncle. What do you want? Nothing. I've come for nothing. I just want to be with you, value you. Humbug! You got nothing. You took a wife against my wishes. She's got nothing. You both got nothing. Humbug! There was Scrooge's sin. He was looking at people and valuing them or giving them value or equity based on what they had or what they didn't have, what they accomplished or what they didn't accomplish. And in his world, nobody measured up and nobody ever would measure up. But then these ghosts come along, and at the very end, they say, he comes to the point, and Scrooge asks, will the little boy die? Remember that part? And the ghost says, I see an empty chair at this table, and a crutch carefully preserved in the corner by the fireplace. He says, I just was hoping, Scrooge says, I was hoping the little boy didn't have to die. Well, if he's going to die, let him do it and decrease the surplus population. Remember that? Scrooge goes, oh, you used my own words against me. Yes, I did. You were the one that devalued this boy so long ago. When all the while you had the means to change the course of that child's existence. And you didn't do it. Did you, Lazarus? Scrooge. Same story, different time. You didn't do it, did you? Because you valued the greatest treasure God gave us, another entity, in terms of whether or not you thought they were worth it. Wow. And you hope to get a relationship with God. You can't even get a relationship with a kid that's dying right in front of you. Well, maybe he should just die and decrease the surplus population. I like gosh, I got so many versions running through my head, I can't remember them all. I think it was the Patrick Stewart one, where the big jolly ghost of Christmas present says, perhaps before you open your mouth the next time, you should seriously consider what is or who is the surplus population. And then he adds that other line, because in the eyes of heaven, This tiny child is valued 1,000,000,000% more than you. Of course, Timothy, Tiny Tim's the one that's saying, God bless us, everyone. He's in tune with the Creator. Scrooge is not. Chapter 4, Ecclesiastes, folks. Not just chapter 4. This is his big mistake, is he's devaluating this in terms of this. This didn't satisfy. What makes you think this is going to satisfy? Scrooge didn't have a friend in the world, did he? Neither does Ecclesiastes. Although we see one mention here. Did anybody catch that? It'll appear later in a later chapter when he comes back to revisit it. Anybody read it? Pick up on it? Down toward the end of chapter 4. Come on, girls and boys. Look, search your feelings. A poor yet wise lad is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction. None of you caught that?
But you just look at one.
You're getting ahead of me. Well, you will find later that a foolish young boy, a lad who's accomplished nothing, what do you expect out of a little 5, 6-year-old child? How many degrees you got? You got a MasterCard? What's your bank account look like? What kind of car do you drive? Where do you live? Little kid looks at you and goes, I got a big booger in my nose. And you go, ooh, that's gross. Yeah, but that's what 5-year-olds do. Particularly little boys. I don't know about girls. I raised boys, and they were all gross. As was I. And I hate to say this, God rest his soul, probably my dad before me. And his dad. A, we were all from the South. B, we were all gross. The boy was acting his age. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you're 40 and you're doing that, there's a problem. But the little boy is whistling and hopping and jumping and dancing down the street. And if you've ever taught kids 5 and 6 years old, you know that. Trying to herd cats. You can't do it. They're each one going off on their own way. And here sits above him in his mighty throne, this edifice of all that he has accomplished, is this miserable old man looking out the window, and he looks at the child and says, what a fool is that child. Totally unaware of anything and everything that of value and importance in this world. So he asks the boy, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to meet my mom, and they're going to church to worship. God bless us, everyone. So profound that even a child, a sick, lame child dying, can understand it. And the mighty king cannot receive instruction any longer. Think about that for a second. There it is right there. In God's wisdom. Wisdom literature. If I could look into the mind of God and say, Lord, what do you value? You know what you would read? Verse 13. A poor yet wise lad, he called the boy a fool before, is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to even receive instruction. You've lost your ability for rational thought. Wow. You'll never be able to establish a relationship. Not with man, certainly not with God. Jesus ends his Sermon on the Mount. Seek first a relationship with God. Never mind that kingdom of God stuff. Say it as it is. Seek first a relationship with God, and all this other stuff will take care of itself. What you do quickly. And he looks at this child, and he's happy, and he's at peace, and he's content, not like this fella, dancing his way to two things he loves: his mom, their church or their God? Who's richer? Just asking. Jesus, you got one shot at this. The greatest sermon you're ever going to give. So don't mess it up, will you? Okay, I got a big finish for him. What are you going to say? Seek first the kingdom of God. And never mind all this other nonsense. What the heck does that mean? You know what Jesus answered the guy that asked that question? Have you ever seen Scrooge, the story of Scrooge? Charles Dickens caught it. Who, by the way, was a fabulous Christian man. He caught it. Oh, that all of us could be visited by three spirits. The first, when the bell tolls one. Can't we just have all three of them together and get it over with? That was one of the Scrooges said that. He goes, no, it doesn't work that way. Why? Because that's your way of doing things. God's way of doing things is much different. 99% of the time, different from your ways. Nicodemus, the great wise priest, came to Jesus under the stealthy darkness of night and said, we know that you're something special and that you're probably from God. Otherwise, you couldn't do this stuff. And Jesus answered, did he say, well, you're right, I am from God, and you need to pay better attention. What does Jesus say? You remember? Another stupid answer. He said, unless a man be born again, he will not ever be a part of the kingdom of God. Now you're talking to an old priest here. And Nicodemus looked at him and said, Jesus, are you out of your mind? What does that mean? A man be born again. I can't. 75 years old. My mom's been dead for 30 years. How can I be born again? Well, you can't as long as your brain's up here. Every time Jesus got in direct discourse with anybody about anything, he always answered in the concept of what? The spiritual. That one thing that will end this longing. And everybody else responded to him in terms of what? Well, it's just like Roger said, human nature. We all do it. Not me. Yes, you do. Even good, faithful, holier than thou church people. You're walking down and you're in your temple and you're walking down the aisle there looking for your pew with your name on it and nobody else better be sitting there. And you're coming down and then you see so-and-so coming towards you and you go, whoop, I gotta go to the bathroom. And you scoot off to the little girl's room and you hide. So what? Because you don't want to have to talk to that person. Why do you not want to talk to that person? They don't measure up. Worse, they might even be a pain in the neck sometimes. You know, there's a lot of people in this world you don't want to ask, hey, how's it going? Well, I hope you have 2 hours because they're going to tell you. Oh, woe is me, my kids are terrible, my husband's terrible, my job's terrible, my boss is terrible, my car is terrible, everybody's terrible, everything in the world is terrible. I just am not, except me, of course, I'm not terrible. And when you get into that situation, I've been tempted to say it so many times. I say, well, so-and-so, you will be visited by 3 spirits. Expect the first at the toll of 1. Expect the second at the toll of 2. And the third, I like the answer to the third. He comes when every day Mel feels like it. What a great answer. Old Dickens threw that in there just for a little comic relief. The third, who knows? Nobody can control him. Darn it, Jesus said the same thing, didn't he? The Spirit of God's like the wind. You feel it. You hear it, but you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it's going, and you don't know when it's going to get here, do you? And Nicodemus is sitting there going, what does that mean, God? Stop trying to control him. all these beautiful scriptures we read over and over and over and think, oh, that's pretty, wow, that sounds really good. What does it mean? I haven't got a clue. Well, what should I learn from this wisdom of God? You will be visited by 3 spirits. I hate this verse and I love this verse. The poor yet wise lad is better than the old and foolish king. What makes him old and foolish, Benny? Because he's no longer able or even knows how to receive instruction. How can a man be born again, Jesus? Are you out of your mind? Oh, quite the opposite. Do you ever think about this Bible at all beyond just what surface level tells you? Jesus did nothing new in the New Testament that his Father didn't already speak of or initiate in the Old Testament. Well, then everything's vanity, isn't it? Not necessarily so. There's 2 worlds here. The vanity world, where nothing will ever really amount to a hill of beans, and even if it does, it is passing away. And then this spiritual realm, which obviously you guys have no clue over. And you know what? This spiritual realm of which you long for? No rules over it that you can control. Spirit is like the wind. You feel it. You hear it. You know it's there. But you can't do nothing about it, can you? Now here's Miss Benny, the billionaire, and Mr. Tom, the poor pastor, who's been sitting at your gate, by the way, waiting for a bread.
Getting nothing.
And it's a sweltering day in Florida, as always. 118 in the shade. If you can find shade. We obviously couldn't. So it's about 130. And we're both sitting on this little hill. And here's Miss Benny in all her regalia. And here's poor little Pastor Tom. Naked. Nothing but an ephod. And it's 130 degrees. Am I suffering any less than she is? Not really. And then suddenly, the Lord comes along. And a little puff of wind comes blowing past us. And for a minute, it drops to about 65 degrees. Which one of us didn't enjoy that? Now, you might have understood it better than I, or I might have understood it better than you, but which one of us didn't enjoy it? Oh, we're out of time. There are things in this world you do not have control over, nor will you ever have control over. They are here, they're right in front of you, they're closer to you than your own breath. Oh, Jesus said that too. Breathe it in. Just like you need the air around you now, you need the Lord's Spirit around you now. Breathe it in. Otherwise, you remain the foolish king who can no longer even receive instruction. Ecclesiastes Chapter 4. And remember, above all else, you will be visited by 3 spirits.